Shalom everyone, hope everyone's doing well. Be'ezrat Hashem, today we're going to learn in Masechet Sanhedrin, Chaf Amud Bet, the bottom towards the top of Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. We're going to have really one discussion in today's learning, which is a continuum of the halachot of the Mishnah, of the merits and the rights of the king, and specifically we'll focus in on Shlomo HaMelech's reign, as well as the king's ability to take certain parts of the spoils of war. We're going to start Amar Reish Lakish, which is about 20 lines from the bottom of Chaf Amud Bet. As usual, our learning today should be as a zechut, as a merit for Refuah Shlema for Yaakov ben Dinah. We should hear of a speedy, quick, full recovery, and only b'sarot tovot. Okay, let's get started. We had finished off yesterday discussing how there were 3 mitzvot that the Jewish people were commanded when they enter Eretz Yisrael, and we actually ordered them in the following specific order. The first mitzvah was to appoint a king. The second mitzvah was to destroy Amalek and their enemies. And then finally, when things settled down, there was a mitzvah to build the Beit HaMikdash. So on that note, the Gemara quoted a pasuk regarding Shlomo, and now we're going to discuss how Shlomo HaMelech was unique in terms of his power. The Gemara in Masechet Megillah actually tells us there were 3 people historically listed in the Psukim who ruled over the entire world. Shlomo HaMelech was not included in that list, as we're about to start off, because he ruled over the Elyonim. He ruled over even heavenly beings. So the Gemara tells us like this. Amar Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says, Batchila malach Shlomo al Elyonim. Originally, Shlomo was so powerful. Right? The Jews flourished under David and Shlomo like they had never flourished before or after. They flourished in an incredible way. They were successful materially, spiritually, and also internationally. It was fantastic. The Goyim were sending them gifts that they would use in building the Beit HaMikdash. It was a tremendous time in Jewish history. So initially, Shlomo HaMelech ruled even over the Elyonim. Elyonim means the heavenly beings. He even ruled over the Shedim or the Malachim. Not only in this world did he rule over everything, but even on the heavenly plane. Shene'emar, like the pasuk tells us, Vayeshev Shlomo al kisei Hashem lemelech. Shlomo sat on the throne of Hashem as the king, meaning is that he even ruled over the heavenly beings. However, as Rashi explains here, we know Shlomo HaMelech seemingly is involved in certain behaviors that Hashem considered inappropriate, in particular marrying women from foreign nations. He married the daughter of Paro amongst others, and this was considered a black mark against him. Actually, this seemed to be a trigger to some degree that caused the eventual split in Malchut following Shlomo, which eventually would be the split between Malchut Yisrael and Malchut Yehuda. But either way, the point is that after Shlomo engaged in these certain behaviors that were considered inappropriate, he lost that ability to rule over the Elyonim. Ulebesof malach al tachtonim. So eventually, he only ruled over the physical realm, meaning he ruled over the entire world, but not the Elyonim like we had before. Shene'emar, like the pasuk says, Ki hu rodeh b'chol ever nahar mitifsach v'ad Aza. Shlomo ruled over the entire world from Tifsach until Aza, seemingly 2 countries. And there's a machloket between Rav and Shmuel regarding the placement of these 2 countries, but they both agree he ruled the entire world in this second stage. Rav and Shmuel, Chad Amar, one says Tifsach b'sof ha'olam ba'azav b'sof ha'olam. So one says that these countries are at the ends of the world, and he ruled over the entirety of the world between it as well. Chad Amar, and one said Tifsach v'azav b'hadi adadi havu yatfu. These countries were actually right next to each other. And the chidush is, just like he ruled over these 2 countries which were close in proximity, easier to control, so too he ruled over the entire world. We find a similar idea with Achashverosh, if I remember correctly. It says Mehodu v'ad Kush. Similar debate, but it's the same point, which is he ruled over the entire physical realm. Now, Ulubisof, and later, Lo malach el al Yisrael, he lost his power to some degree, and he only ruled over the Jewish people, meaning he only was ruling over Eretz Yisrael and the Jewish people. Like the pasuk says, Ani kohelet ha'iti melech al Yisrael v'gomer. I was kohelet, Shlomo HaMelech. I ruled over, I was the king over the Jewish people. So he went down a step, seemingly again because of the wrongdoings that he had done. And after this, Lo Malach Elal Yerushalayim, he only ruled over Yerushalayim, Shenemar, like it says, Hine mitatod Shlomo, it says the bed of Shlomo HaMelech, I skipped. Shenemar Divrei Kohelet ben David, Melech Yerushalayim, that Shlomo ruled over Yerushalayim. And after this, Lo Malach Elal Mitato, he only ruled over his bed. Shenemar, like it says, Hine mitato shel Shlomo vegomer. It says this idea, it's an allegory, a drush, obviously, but he ruled over only his bed, vegomer. Now, ulabesof, in the end, Lo Malach Ela al Makalo, he only ruled over his walking stick. So Rashi explains this is actually based on a storyline in Masechet Gittin at Samachet, Amud Aleph to Amud Bet there. The storyline goes over there that Shlomo HaMelech wanted to build the Beit HaMikdash, but the stones had to be built in a very unique way, which was that you didn't cut it with a metal tool. And there was a special worm called the Shamir worm, which was used in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, that could miraculously cut through stone without using a metal implement. Shlomo wanted to know where this was, so we could use it in the production of the Beit HaMikdash. In order to find it, he had to trap the king of demons, whose name was Ashmedai. Because apparently that king Ashmedai knew where this Shamir worm was. So he took this Ashmedai into captivity after a procedure as discussed there. And then the story goes that at some point later, Ashmedai essentially overthrew Shlomo, threw him out of being the king, and feigned as if he was the king. Now the Gemara there in Masechet Gittin seems to illustrate eventually Shlomo regained his power, which we'll get to in a minute. It's a machloket Rav and Shmuel actually. But either way, for the time being at least, he was only ruling over his stick, meaning he had lost Malchut entirely. Shene'amar, like the pasuk says, Ze haya chelki mikol amali. This was my portion from all of my labor. What was my portion? Rav Shmuel Chad Amar Makalo. One said he only ruled over his stick. V'chad Amar Gundo. And one says he only ruled over his gundo. Rashi says two pshatim. Either it means his cloak or it means his cup that he used to use to drink water. But either way, he had completely lost all of his levels of malchut, and he only had these meager items that he was able to control. So the Gemara asks, Hadar or lo Hadar? Did he regain his power eventually or not? Rav Shmuel, Chad Amar Hadar, v'chad Amar lo Hadar. So it's a machloket. Either he did or he didn't. Manda Amar lo Hadar, according to the one who says he did not regain his power, Melech ve'edyot. So in his lifetime, he was a king, but then he became a commoner, an ordinary person, because he ultimately lost that original power. Umanda Amar Hadar, and the one who says that he did regain his power, Melech ve'edyot umelech, he went from being a king to being a commoner to being back to being a king, and therefore he did regain his original power. Now, the Mefarshim here explain that it seems like he did regain his position. The only question really is, did he regain it in its original glory? And that's the emphasis here, is that he didn't, which we're saying, at least according to one shita, is that he did not regain that power like in the beginning, that he was Malach al Elyonim over the heavenly beings. That, according to one shita at least, he did not regain. That is the pshat in this debate. Okay. Yeah. Fine. Let's continue. The Mishnah told us, Poretz lasot lo derech. We said the king is allowed to breach somebody else's property if it creates a shortcut to get to one of his fields or his vineyards. And then we finished off the Mishnah and we said, when it comes to the spoils of war, the king gets the first portion. So Tana Rabbanan, the Braita elaborates and it says, Otzrot Melachim. If the Jewish army goes out to war and they conquer Otzrot Melachim, the treasury of other kings, so Lemelech, that goes entirely to the king, the Jewish king. The Shar Bizah Shebozazin, the rest of the loot that they plunder, Mechza Lemelech u Mechza Le'am. So half goes to the king and he gets first, and the other half is divided up by the people. Abai said to Rav Dimi, I understand the plunder of the king, meaning the treasury of other kings goes to the king, or that seems to be derech eretz, that's the appropriate thing to happen. But how do we know that when they conquer other types of properties or other types of monies, etc., that the king would get 50% and then the nation would get the other 50%? Where do we find a reference to this idea? Minalan, so the pasuk tells us in Divrei Yamim, when it compares, it seems to highlight Shlomo as the king and Tzadok as the Kohen Gadol. So it says, Vayimshechu, turning to Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, Vayimshechu LaHashem L'Negid, they anointed him for Hashem as the ruler. Shlomo HaMelech, he became the king. U'letzadok l'Kohen, and they appointed Tzadok as the Kohen Gadol. So the Gemara says, Makish Negid l'Tzadok. We compare Shlomo, the king, to Tzadok, the Kohen Gadol. Ma tzadok mechza lo mechza le'achav. Just as regarding the Kohen Gadol, when it came to the lechem apanim, we'll see in a moment, Rashi highlights this, the breads that were put on the shulchan, which we know were changed every Shabbat, so those breads went half to the Kohen Gadol and half to the other Kohanim, half to his brethren. So too regarding the king, that half of the spoils of war that were not of the treasury would go to the king, and half of the spoils of war would go to the rest of the people. How do we know that regarding the Kohen Gadol himself, he would take half of the lechem apanim? The Tanya, as the Braita elaborates, it says, Rebbe Omer v'haita le'Aaron u'levanav. It says by the lechem apanim, it will be for Aaron and his children. So by virtue of putting them as equals, it teaches us mechza le'Aaron, that half of it will go for Aaron, meaning the Kohen Gadol, u'mechza lebanav, and the other half of lechem apanim will be used and eaten by the rest of the Kohanim. So by virtue of the comparison, we're saying also regarding the spoils of war, the king would get half of the spoils, and the people would get half of the rest of the spoils that existed other than the treasury of the other kings. We're stopping at the top of at the Mishnah, Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, at the top of the page. Zat Hashem will pick up tomorrow with Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. In the meantime, everybody have a wonderful day.